Cardinal News is telling the little-known stories of Virginia's role in our country's march to independence. As we head toward America's 250th anniversary, we'll examine the events, people, and places that shaped the Commonwealth and the nation. Together we can better understand the role of our ancestors beyond what's in the history books. This is Cardinal 250, made possible in part by funding from the Virginia American Revolution 250 Commission.
Welcome to Cardinal News 250. I'm Dutchie Jessee. Thank you for listening, and we want to thank our sponsor. Cardinal News 250 is sponsored by the Bank of Botetourt, focused on you. Well, in this episode, we're talking about the magazine. It's one of the most recognized sites within Colonial Williamsburg historic area. It figures prominently in a major turning point in our history nearly 250 years ago. It has a remarkable and unique structure, which is being preserved during its current restoration. And joining us to dig into all of this is Matt Webster. He is the executive director of Colonial Williamsburg Foundation's Granger Department of Architectural Preservation and Research. That's a mouthful. Matt, welcome to Cardinal News 250.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're excited to get to talking about this. I also want to point out to our listeners here that you can read all about this and see some interesting illustrations and photos referencing what we're talking about here in the Cardinal News 250 article on the subject written by Brandy Centellanza. I hope I'm saying that right. I don't know Brandy. She's a freelancer. And I encourage you to check that out. So just go to cardinalnews.org and click on our 250 tab. Lots of interesting stuff there. So, Matthew, what is the magazine in Williamsburg? What is that?
So the magazine's a structure. It's one of our original structures here at Colonial Williamsburg. It's actually, it's there to store military items. So guns, tents, blankets, gunpowder in the 18th century. And it's really, I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, for people that are not familiar with the term magazine in that sense, that's what it is, right?
Right. So magazine, most people from a military standpoint understand as a magazine is basically ammunition storage, and in this case, gunpowder storage. But in the early 18th century, and it's a really interesting story, is a magazine is a storehouse, kind of a general storehouse and for military supplies.
Okay. This one in Williamsburg is unique. It's shaped like an octagon. Tell me how, why, who designed it? Because correct me if I'm wrong, there's not another one like it.
No, there's not. It's a really unique structure. And what we think how this building developed is that we absolutely know in the early 18th century, Governor Spotswood, who's the royal governor of Virginia, that he has this magazine built. And the reason that it's built is that Queen Anne had gifted, just before she died, had gifted arms to the colony of Virginia to help protect it, which was a very, very serious situation in the early 18th century, really up until the French and Indian War, where the English colonies were their survival was very much in question. They were constantly threatened by basically the French and Spanish. And so lots of questions. So she gifts these arms, and Spotswood then lobbies for a magazine to be built. And Spotswood had served under the Duke of Marlborough and the wars in mainland Europe. And so he was a quartermaster general, and so he was responsible for military supplies and logistics. So he would have seen things like this in Europe and understood kind of how this was supposed to work. But in the case of Williamsburg, it's this hybrid structure, because it's not just gunpowder, it's not just guns, it's not food or tents or blankets, it's all of the above. So what we have here is a very unique hybrid structure seemingly built specifically for the needed use of the Virginia colony.
Is that why it's specifically an octagon? Because that's difficult, right?
Right. Yeah. So why it's an octagon, we're not quite sure. We just don't know. But Spotswood also he's very much a designer. He gets involved in building projects, and we know that for sure, especially design. So I think that this is it's just a unique design, and you do see octagonal buildings in military, architecture, and there are actually other octagonal powder magazines out there. There's some in Scotland and mainland Europe as well.
Hmm. We are going to get to what's the current restoration and renovation of it coming up. First, though, let's go back in history and talk about a major incident that happened at the magazine, with the magazine, and really, it's a pretty pivotal moment in
Yes.
in our nation's history and in Virginia's history. So, tell me about this famous incident. It has been called the second shot heard around the world, although it wasn't a literal gunshot.
Right.
What is it?
Right. Yeah, no, it's actually the lack of a gunshot.
Mhm.
So so it's called the powder incident, the gunpowder incident, and it happens on April 21st, 1775. And the relationships with the colonies had already been really, really strained. And here in Virginia, Lord Dunmore, who's then the royal governor in 1775, he's disbanded the House of Burgesses. So the representatives from the colony of Virginia in Virginia's government were disbanded. So that led to a lot of strain. There were a lot of other things that happened. And then on April 21st, 1775, Dunmore sends some Royal Marines in to take the gunpowder from the magazine. So the powder for the colony of Virginia, so it could defend itself. He does that saying that there was going to be an uprising, and so that's how he kind of presents it. But the colonists don't they know that that's just a story, and so it actually ends up really pushing Virginia into the Revolution.
It's called
And only, I'm sorry,
the
it's the
gunpowder
gunpowder.
incident.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, it had been used or it has been used over the years as a market, an arsenal, a stable, and a church. And I'm reading it because that's several things. I wanted to
Right.
get it all in there.
Right.
All of which has resulted in major alterations and loss of much of its original 18th century materials. How long have you been with the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation?
I've been with the foundation for 17 years.
Wow, so you've been there for a while.
Been here for a little while. Yes.
Yeah. So, and I just asked that because, what you do there is about preservation. It's about preserving history and in some cases structures, right? Very,
Right.
very old structures. Talk about where we are with the Octagon now, or the magazine. Call it the Octagon, but the magazine with it's been through some things before, so this is not the first time it's had an I don't want to say overhaul, renovation. Tell me, how do you go about that?
Sure. So it's we conduct an investigation. We look at the markings in the building, the technology used to build the building, and then what technology was used for alterations over time. And so you can kind of reverse engineer everything. And so certain techniques like sawing wood, seems kind of simple, but the technology evolves over time and how they do that kind of on a large scale. So we look for those marks, for those shifts in technology, which then give us dates, give us an idea of when change occurs, when things are removed. And so how this started is we started to take down some of the finishes that were placed in the 1930s, and really started to look at the original surfaces inside the magazine. We were the first ones to really look at those in almost 100 years. And what you have to remember in this process is we build off of everyone that came before us in this process. And so when they were restoring the magazine in the 1930s, the foundation is only a few years old. And so they only had that much research to build on. Now we have over 100 years of research and all of the new technology that comes into play with what we do. So we have a huge advantage in understanding, how this building evolved and how to read these buildings in the process. And so we go over things like, plaster marks on the wall, or nail holes or nails that are still there, all of that woodwork that's there. The magazine's had a really rough life. But that being said, there's still a lot of original material there. So we can, it's a little more difficult than some of the buildings that we look at, trying to work through all of these changes and understand what it looked like in 1775, but there's absolutely evidence there. So that's what we're in the process of doing right now.
So is this the first time in this current undertaking started back in 21? Because it's a process that takes several years, correct?
Right. Yes.
So is the last time that was done the 1930s?
Yes. Yeah. The last time that this building was really looked at as far as understanding, how it looked in the 18th century was in the 1930s.
Yeah. So how big of an undertaking is this? Talk to me about the number of people involved and what kind of, job site it is, if you don't mind poking us through that.
Oh, sure. So there's a lot of people involved, both here at Colonial Williamsburg, internal staff to the foundation. So maintenance, preservation, archaeology, conservation. I don't think there's a department here at the foundation that's not involved in this project in some way. And we involve a lot of specialty contractors as well. So some of the analytical work is done by individuals outside the foundation, as well as some of the trades that we have involved in the project. So in a day-to-day, we're basically doing this work, but also adapting to what the building's telling us to do. So we say that these buildings are very good at destroying plans. So you go into the day with a plan, the building presents you with some evidence that it doesn't follow the plan, and you follow the evidence. That's what we do. So we're constantly adapting, making sure that these buildings are restored as accurately as possible. So that's kind of the day-to-day, is you're just slowly going through everything, making sure that you get it right, and also making sure that you do no harm, that you're not damaging original material in the building as well.
Yeah, can you give me an example of that, Matt, of a situation where you went in thinking we would do it this way, but you found something? Can you talk to me about that? Because I think that's so interesting for those of us who aren't in this line of work. We're not archaeologists.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, that's every day. It's every project, every day that it's like that. And, be quite honest with what we do. If it doesn't happen that way, it makes you nervous. It makes you think that you're missing something. So, the window configurations, how those are laid out, or, the height of the magazine wall. That was another example of thinking it. We didn't think we were going to change the height of the wall until the archaeologist uncovered the foundation of the wall. And you started to look and say, this isn't a foundation that you would see for a 10-foot tall wall. It's too small. So why is that? And you start digging into the information on why they made this decision. So the magazine wall was pulled down. It's built around the time of the French and Indian War. A very tall and strong wall was called for to be built during the French and Indian War around the magazine. That's torn down in the mid-19th century. And when they go to reconstruct that during the restoration of the building and the site, they interview several people from around Williamsburg, and this foundation was kind of the catalyst for this, looking at that and saying, hey, something's not right here. And so we started to look at all the individuals interviewed, and every individual that said that the wall was taller than 7 feet, what we found is that they weren't born when the wall was still standing. And the only individual to say that it was below 7 feet or lower, was the individual who he was the son of the mason who worked on the wall, and he was alive when the wall was standing.
Wow.
And so all of a sudden it shifted dramatically from, we didn't think we were going to be dealing with the wall, to, oh my gosh, we have to lower the wall, which means we have to change the gate design. And that led to a whole new path for the project. So that's what happens on a daily basis here.
Right. It's that's pretty intense. Do you feel like is the data pretty good for the round back in the 1930s when this was last really changed? Do you have good records to go by from that one? I mean, because that you're doing a little bit of a detective work, I imagine, with some of this too. Like you just said, speaking to the person who was the son of a mason. Right.
I mean, there are pretty good records. I mean, the thing that part of how the field evolves is, I mean, it's a learning process.
Mhm.
So they were at the very beginning. No one was really trying to do anything like this at this point in the preservation world. In the preservation world really didn't even exist.
Mhm.
Um, so what we have now is that we know the evidence, we know the clues to look for. And the great thing that they've left us with is not only the documents and those types of records, but the photographs. So we can go back and look at the photographs, and while sections, so the window, for instance, the lunette window that we just put in, all the evidence for that was found in photographs because the restoration in the 1930s wiped out all the evidence that was there from the 18th century. So looking at those photos, we were able to locate exactly where it was, tell that that was an original feature of the building because you don't see any change, any damage patterns associated with it, and really lock down on this is where it was. It's 18th century. It belongs to this period, and to put that back into place. So the photography is absolutely critical from that early period for us.
Yeah. Are you on track? You have a deadline.
Right.
We all have a deadline for
Right.
this whole 250 project, and that is July 2026.
Yes.
Are you on track? Is it going well? Not to, put you on the spot because delays happen, but do you feel like it's going pretty well?
I think it's going pretty well. We have a really, really good team. The
Mhm.
evidence is really coming together now, and so I'm really happy with where we are at this point. And the big thing for us is that this is one of many projects we have going on at Colonial Williamsburg right now, and we're busier really than we've been since the 1950s as far as the restoration of our structures and reconstruction. So
Well, I wanted to ask you, you've been with the foundation for 17 years, did we say?
yes,
So, I mean, you're working in a historic location that's well known and visited. It's a huge destination for all populations, really, like school age to families and everything in between, from people all over the world. I'm assuming. And you've just been going about your business all these years maintaining Williamsburg. Well, now we're getting ready to come up to this major milestone, right? And
right.
I dare say there will be more people there. And then the, I guess, the pressure of getting this done on time and what will everyone see because we're opening up to next year, which is the 250th anniversary. So how's your job changing? Do you feel any of that? Or are you just like, no, we do this every day. And Williamsburg is every day for us, that it's just part of it.
It is every day, but I mean, there's definitely that pressure. And again, I mean, most of that pressure comes from the fact that we don't know what we're going to
Mm-hmm.
find. So when you get into these projects, once you're in, and you don't know what you're going to find or what you're going to have to adapt to. So that's always kind of the stress point. It's also the exciting part of it.
Mm-hmm.
What new evidence are you going to find? What's it going to tell us? What's it going to tell us? What did it look like? How did people function in those buildings? All that information is there. You just have to know how to find it. And you don't want to miss it, but you also don't want to damage it. And so that's a big part of the pressure, is how to do these projects, get it right, and make sure that you're not erasing evidence, which is erasing the story in the process.
I'm wondering if you're documenting this process for posterity, like with video and other things where you're really going to use this as a learning process for maybe other preservation projects, but also for the future of the Williamsburg Foundation.
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
that's part of this, is the documentation. So lots and lots of photographs. Um, we have hand drawings. We have all of our notes from the processes, contracts, things like that. All
Mhm.
that there. But the big thing that we're doing right now is that we do a lot of scanning of the buildings, and that's done in multiple ways. We do laser scanning sometimes, which is incredibly accurate. Thousands and thousands of measured points, hundreds of thousands of measured points all over these buildings. But every time we have a major change, we use a process called Matterport, which
Mhm.
is what a lot of realtors use for the virtual tours through the building.
Mhm.
But you can scale that so you actually, so everything's scalable in the image, and you can load information in there as well. So every time one of these projects has a major change, we do a Matterport, basically documentation of the building.
Yeah. What are you excited about for, let's fast forward to not to wish life away, but when this is all said and done and we have our big celebrations in July of next year, you're so familiar with everything there at the foundation and in Williamsburg as part of your job and your life. What are you looking forward to in terms of the general public? And would you encourage people who maybe thought they knew Williamsburg up and down, or have visited a lot, to come on back at some point, maybe when the crowds calm down, or maybe they want to be part of it all. I don't know.
I mean, I think, the story here is of always evolving, and it's,
Hmm.
it really is, it's a huge research project, and
Hmm.
we never, even when we finish a project, we start asking more questions. And Colonial Williamsburg, and I've worked quite a few places and been involved with a lot of historic sites, is that Colonial Williamsburg implements its research rapidly. So when we find new information and we're fairly certain that this is the way it was, we tend to implement very quickly. So that story is always evolving, and as you put those pieces into place, that story gets more and more accurate. So a lot of people are like, oh, what's the building? It's just the building, but you're learning how people functioned and interacted with that building through through an accurate restoration, through all this information that we're pulling out. So exactly how did the gunpowder incident play out? What did those Royal Marines have to do to get the gunpowder out of that building? And the only way to know that is to actually restore the building back to the way it was when the incident occurred. And so understanding, how was it stored, where was it stored, how did they get in, how did they get out? And so that interaction is really, I think, important, at least for me, when I engage with historic sites, is because these are the tangible links. These are the this building was there. It's where it happened, and what we're putting back is the interior and the exterior exactly, or as close as possible to the way it looked when the incident occurred, so visitors can come in and understand what happened there.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. Well, Matt Webster, thank you so much. Matt is with the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation. Appreciate your time today, and best of
Thank
luck
you.
with everything coming in the months ahead.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you so much. And I want to thank everyone for listening to Cardinal News 250. And thanks to our sponsor, Bank of Botetourt, focused on you. Tune in or go to cardinalnews.org and find the News 250, the Cardinal News 250 tab, to see more about all of our writing and research on this project. I'm Dutchie Jessee for Cardinal News.
Thanks for listening to Cardinal 250, made possible in part by funding from the Virginia American Revolution 250 Commission. For more information on Cardinal News 250, including the Cardinal 250 and other newsletters, visit cardinalnews.org.